Hear these words from the Gospel of Luke. Luke 6, starting with verse 20. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day, and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven. For that is what their ancestors did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to false prophets. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you." May God add blessing to the reading and the hearing of the word. The Beatitudes are pretty well known sayings of Jesus. Jesus challenges people's expectations with these words, saying, Blessed are thee. And then lists a group of people who aren't usually considered very blessed. You may have noticed, if you pay close attention, that the reading today sounded just a little bit different than the usual blessed are thee that we usually hear, because we usually read the version that's in Matthew. Some stories appear in multiple Gospels, sometimes in slightly different forms, because the different writers have slightly different focuses, and that's the case with the Beatitude. Matthew starts out the Sermon on the Mount with a series of sayings about surprising people who Jesus calls blessed. Luke doesn't talk about a sermon on a mountain, but here he talks about a sermon on a plain. And again, with the Sermon on the Plain, Jesus starts out with talking about surprising people who are blessed, but the folks here are just a little bit different than the ones in Matthew, because Luke is more direct. Luke gets right to the point, and Luke likes to make us feel just a little bit more uncomfortable. Matthew is a bit more diplomatic. Matthew says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Luke just says, "Blessed are the poor." Matthew talks about those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, but Luke just talks about those who are hungry. That's a small change in wording. Poor in spirit instead of poor. Hunger and thirst for righteousness instead of hungry. But it's a pretty dramatic change in meaning. The poor in spirit, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, that's just a little bit easier for us to identify with. We can consider ourselves part of that group. We're comfortable with Jesus saying that those who are having some trouble will be made better off. And we'd like to think of ourselves as hungering and thirsting for righteousness. But here, in Luke, Jesus just says, "Blessed are the poor." And it's harder to get on board with that, because most of us are not hugely wealthy. Most of us have to be cautious about what we do with our money. Most of us have to be careful about how we make things, how we make ends meet. We certainly all know people who are in pretty difficult financial positions where everything is pretty tight. That's a real a real source of stress. But most of us know where we're going to sleep tonight. And most of us know whether or not we're going to be able to have some food today. When Jesus talks about the poor, he's talking about the lowest of the low, the most helpless, most hopeless, people who have absolutely nothing. And those are the people he describes as blessed. When we think of the poorest people, we may ask God to bless them. Or we may think about them and say, well, bless their hearts. But we aren't likely to look at them and say, that person, that homeless, hungry person with the sign is truly blessed. That's just not our understanding of what it means to be blessed. Blessed means favored. It means happy. It means in a special or privileged position. I don't think I've ever seen a hungry person, a truly hungry person, and said to myself, well, look how lucky she is. It just defies common sense. We know that those people don't have some of the things that they need. We know that they should be scared. They should be hungry. They should be maybe ashamed of something in their past. They should be fearful and wondering what's going to happen next. Whatever they feel, we know that it shouldn't be happiness. Because those folks don't have what we consider important. And most likely they don't have what they consider important. So why in the world would Jesus call them blessed? Why would Jesus call them privileged and happy? It just doesn't seem to fit. But it seems that one reason, it seems that one of the things that's going on, it seems that one of the things that Jesus is pointing out when he calls those poor, pitiful people blessed, is that God's attention is on the people who need it. God's compassion is with the people who are in need of compassion. God has special compassion and pays special attention to people who are neglected, people who are outcast, ignored, people who are generally considered unworthy. Nobody else loves those people. Nobody else usually even recognizes them as humans. Nobody recognizes that those people are created in the image of God. Nobody else extends courtesy and compassion to those people, even though God tells us to do that over and over and over. And so God picks up the slack. God extends a special love, a special connection to those people who are most in need. God reaches out to them because nobody else does. God reaches out to them because the rest of us look down on them, but God, the creator of everything, refuses to look down on them, refuses to brush them aside, and instead pays attention to them, listens to them, loves them, and treasures them. That's a blessed thing, to be specially paid attention to by God. And I think that in many cases, they are more willing to receive God when we're comfortable. When we have everything that we need, we aren't as likely to ask for something higher. When our lives seem good enough, we may not be inclined to believe that we need to be redeemed. When we have enough, when we think that we have achieved all that we need to achieve, we're not very likely to turn to God. So even if God is reaching out to us, we may not be as aware as those people who have nothing else, as those people who have nowhere else to turn. When we think that we ourselves are sufficient, when we think that we are enough, when we think that we can do everything that needs to be done, when we think that we can achieve everything that we need, then we're not likely to seek or even to receive God's salvation. Those folks who are outcast, those folks who are forgotten, those folks who seem so pitiful, Jesus says that they are blessed. Jesus likes to turn things on their head because those people are in a position that allows them to connect with God in a special way. But believing that can be dangerous. Because we can look at those people and we can say, wow, Jesus said how good things are for them. And Jesus said that because of their position, that because of how their lives are, that they're in a special position to receive God, so we don't need to worry about it. God loves them, so we shouldn't. Well, we can say that. Plenty of folks certainly have. But Jesus told those people that they were missing the point. Believing that the poor and hungry people are blessed can be problematic, because if we really believe that, then we can be less inclined to help them. And our society already is not very inclined to offer help to people, so doing so even less would be cruel and would be tragic. Christ tells us that they are blessed, not to tell us to leave them alone, but to point out something that's going on in their lives, to point out the dependence that they have on God, and to invite us to recognize that our lives in some ways are not so different as them, because we don't have everything either. We don't have everything figured out. And so God calls us not to recognize that we need faster cars, not to recognize that we need newer clothes and better jewelry and bigger houses and more material things. But God calls us to recognize that just like those folks who have no material things, we too are in need of something. Not something physical, but something that comes from God. We are in need of love. We are in need of being built up. We are in need of receiving that salvation that is offered to each of us. Christ extends that offer to us, that offer to redefine ourselves, that offer to turn from the ways that we think are important, that offer to avoid defining ourselves by the characteristics of the world and define ourselves instead by the characteristics of God. Luke is also different than Matthew because he goes on. Matthew starts out and talks about a few folks who are blessed, but Luke talks about the flip side of the coin too. In addition to saying, blessed are the poor, he says, woe to you who are rich, woe to you who are full, woe to you who are laughing, woe to you when all speak well of you. Woe to you. That's the opposite of blessing. That's something like a warning or even a curse. Because he's telling us that when we think we are enough, when we think that the lunch we have and the clothes we have and the house we have are all that we need to define ourselves with respect to God and with respect to one another, then we have missed the point. And he tells us instead that we should act differently. That we shouldn't try to focus on ourselves, but that we should treat other people the way we want to be treated. Love our enemies. Bless those who curse you. Turn the other cheek if anybody attacks you. Give to everybody who asks, and don't worry about getting it back. It's an upside-down definition of how to be blessed. It's an upside-down definition of what it is to be important, because it's an upside-down kingdom that Christ invites us into, a kingdom defined not by how many other people we can beat, not by how many other people we can outrace, not by how many people we can rule over, but it's a kingdom defined by love. In these words from Luke, he reminds us to embrace that love, to accept the love that Christ offers to us, and to recognize that whether we have absolutely nothing, or whether we have enough that the world is jealous of us, that what we need is Christ. That what we need is God to move in us and to define us. And he invites us to do that. And in doing so, we will be blessed. Amen. Jesus talks about who is blessed. Jesus talks about who is happy, who is in a privileged state before God. Jesus talks about who has that special connection with the higher being, that special connection with eternity, that special connection with God. But when he lists who is blessed, he lists surprising people. He lists people whose accomplishments don't seem all that impressive. He lists people who have not been able to do everything that they want to do for themselves, and he lists people who recognize that there is something better available. Blessed are the poor, the hungry, the hated, the abused. What better place is there to come together as we think about what that looks like? What better place to come together as we think about what the redemption of being blessed means than this table, where we come together to reflect on something broken, something tragic, something cruel, something self-seeking by those who crucified Jesus. When we come together to think of something that seemed beyond hope. But we come together and we celebrate it regularly, just as people for 2,000 years have. Just as all those saints across all those miles, across all those years, across all those different expressions of Christianity have. We come together to celebrate that we are blessed. That through that brokenness we are invited to participate in something redemptive. That we are invited to salvation. because of what Christ does for us, because of what we remember at this table. And so, as we come together, as we break this bread, as we remember, as we celebrate this new covenant, and as we remember, as we do this, we seek to be part of that group who is blessed. Not for our own glory, not for our own selfish ends, but because that is what God created us for. That is what God seeks to bring about in the world. And that is what it means to be brothers and sisters of Christ, to be children of God, to be saints.